Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Minnesota Housing's information session on the Workforce Housing Development Program. My name is Sarah Bunn, and I am the Workforce Housing Program and Multifamily Engagement Manager. In today's webinar, we will review important details of the program to keep in mind as you are putting together applications. A recorded version of this presentation as well as the slides will be provided on our website for reference. Next slide. Some of you may already be familiar with Minnesota Housing's work. For those of you who are not, Minnesota Housing provides access to safe, decent, and affordable housing and builds stronger communities across the state. We also support the development and preservation of affordable rental housing through both financing and long-term asset management. Additionally, we have pioneered a successful model for supportive housing that helps stabilize the lives of some of the state's most vulnerable citizens. Today's agenda includes a review of the purpose of the program and some key program features, a brief overview of how applications will be reviewed and scored, highlights of a few important responsibilities of the recipients, including the importance of understanding contract obligations before requesting and committing to funds, an overview of the application timeline, and finally, we'll have some time to go over any questions that you may have at the end. Let's start by going over the purpose of the Workforce Housing Development Program. The purpose of the program is to help finance qualified expenditures of project-specific costs resulting in the direct development of market-rate residential rental properties in order to address the lack of workforce housing in Greater Minnesota. Funds will be awarded through a request for proposals, RFP process, to communities with proven job growth and demand for workforce rental housing. I want to make you aware of some of the key program features to keep in mind when you're working on your application. The program guide provides a more detailed definition for your reference, but eligible applicants are generally small to mid-sized cities in Greater Minnesota. Funds cannot be awarded directly to a developer, and the Minnesota Housing will not review applications submitted by ineligible applicants. Once awarded, applicants will enter into an agreement with the developer listed in the application to award funds to the project identified. Applicants can award funds to the developer as a grant or a deferred loan. And if applicants award funds as a deferred loan, the terms must be equal to or more favorable than the terms they receive from Minnesota Housing. Minnesota Housing will not provide contract templates for applicants to use with their developers. You'll be responsible for having that drafted on your own. Applicants should not request Minnesota Housing funds in an amount greater than 25% of the total development cost of the project. Applicants must submit a project workbook that demonstrates the funds would not exceed the statutory threshold. This is an application threshold requirement, and Minnesota Housing will not review any applications in which the requests exceed 25% of the total development cost. So make sure that you double check that if you change your budget before you submit your application. If awarded, recipients must begin construction within 12 months of signing their contract, and construction completion must occur prior to the end of the 3-year contract term. Applicants must have a commitment of matching funds of $1 for every $2 requested from Minnesota Housing. Applicants must submit a government resolution that states where the matching funds will come from. For example, a local unit of government, business, nonprofit, or combination of these sources is fine. With the application deadline being December 17th this year, please make sure that you're being thoughtful about the approvals required to obtain resolutions and otherwise. I know many times council meetings are altered around the holidays, so again, just please make sure that you're planning for future action around potentially altered schedules. Matching funds do not have to be a cash investment in the project. They can also be in-kind donations or a combination of both. It's important to remember that matching funds cannot come from the developer or any entity affiliated with the developer. Additionally, previous incurred project costs do not count toward the matching funds. In the next section, I will be discussing threshold requirements that applicants must meet in order to move to the scoring phase. Applicants must demonstrate that they meet 5 threshold requirements. These threshold requirements are statutory. The next few slides will go over each requirement in more detail, but essentially applicants must demonstrate that they are eligible or an eligible project area under this program, demonstrate that the rental vacancy rate in the area is at or below 5%, and that it has been for at least the prior 2-year period. Applicants must demonstrate that the funds will be used for statutory qualified expenditures and that there is the required commitment of matching funds. Applicants must also demonstrate community need for the proposed project and provide a letter of support from a local business. And finally, the amount of funds requested cannot exceed 25% of the total development cost of the project. Applicants must demonstrate that they are one of 3 eligible project areas. So what do we mean by eligible project area? This term is from the Workforce Housing Statute, but essentially eligible project area and eligible applicants or recipients mean the same thing. Eligible applicants are typically small to mid-sized cities in greater Minnesota. We've posted a city list on our website that provides all cities in Minnesota that meet the population preference of 5,000 or fewer residents. In most cases, small and mid-sized cities can refer to the eligible city list that we have posted on our website to determine if they are eligible. If you are listed on the eligible city list, you do not need to worry about the other 2 project area options. If you are not listed on the eligible city list, you must demonstrate in your application that you meet one of the other 2 criteria. And the application checklist has detailed information regarding what supporting documentation that you would need to submit in those instances. If you are not listed on the eligible city list, you must demonstrate in your application that you meet one of the other 2 criteria. And you can do this by providing a map of a project area and the population of the area, or providing documentation that the area is served by a joint county-city economic development authority. Applicants only need to meet one of the eligible definitions. To demonstrate that you meet the rental vacancy rate requirement, you will need to submit a signed certification form stating that the average rental vacancy rate has been at or below 5% for a minimum of 2 years. We do not require a market study to support this, but if you do have one and you've had one done, we always appreciate that being submitted as well. To meet the qualified expenditure threshold requirements, you will also certify an application that if awarded funds, those funds will result in the direct development of market rate residential properties. Examples of eligible uses of funds include acquisition of a property, construction of improvements, and related financing costs. As discussed earlier, applicants must have a commitment of matching funds of $1 for every $2 requested. Applicants will submit a government resolution that must state where the matching funds will come from. Again, a local unit of government, business, nonprofit, or a combination. Matching funds do not have to be cash investment in the property or the project. They can also be in-kind donations or a combination of both. Remember, matching funds cannot come from the developer or an entity affiliated with the developer. And also keep in mind that previously incurred project costs do not count towards the match. Applicants also need to submit at least one letter from one local business that employs a minimum of 20 full-time employees. Applicants can submit more than one letter from more than one business if the total number of full-time employees between all businesses equals 20 or more. We provide a template letter on our website for you to use that you can just go ahead and fill out. Makes it pretty simple. The letter must contain information to support the need for housing in the area. The more detailed, the better. For example, an applicant from the last funding round submitted a letter from a local healthcare provider that was renting out units in an assisted living home in order to retain workers. So, any sort of extra information that you can provide or detail along those lines, giving us just kind of more information about the situation at hand is very helpful. The letter or letters should help tell the story of the housing issues in your community. And letters that do not include the distance from the business to the eligible project area and the total number of full-time employees will not count towards satisfying this threshold requirement. Applicants who meet all threshold requirements will be scored using 5 scoring categories. For readiness to proceed, we will be looking at things such as site control, zoning, and approvals, and secured financing. For leverage, we will be looking at the applicant's funding request as a percentage of the total development cost. And just again, remember that cannot, the total development, or the requested amount from Minnesota Housing cannot exceed the 25% of total development cost. But keep in mind that applicants with smaller requests will score better. For market characteristics, we will be looking at characteristics such as the share of the project's market rate units and the size of the project. For community size, a preference will be given to communities with fewer than 30,000 residents. With feasibility, we will look at things like capacity of the development team and evidence that there is a need for workforce housing in the area, including demonstrating job growth and the current rental housing supply in the area. We will also look at if the proposal, including unit mix and rent, aligns with the needs of the current workforce. And then finally, applicants with developments that will be located within an opportunity zone will also receive additional points. And we have included in the scoring materials or the application materials online this year, the points available for each one of those sections. So if you're interested in how that's weighted, I encourage you to look through the application documents and be aware that that information is available this year. Opportunity zones are a new community development program established by Congress in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 to encourage long-term investments in low-income and urban communities nationwide. Governors designate eligible census tracts as opportunity zones in their states. Minnesota currently has 128 census tracts for designation as an opportunity zone. Investors receive tax deferrals when capital gains are invested in an opportunity fund. And Minnesota Housing is encouraging applicants with projects that will be in opportunity zones to apply for the workforce housing development resources. Additional points are being set aside for applicants with eligible projects located in an opportunity zone. Applicants who are interested and want to learn more should visit DOO's website. It's pretty easy to find those maps and additional information on the opportunity zones on their website. And then this slide outlines Minnesota Housing census tracts that are designated as opportunity zones. And again, you can get more detail on DOO's website on anything opportunity zone related, including additional maps. Once selected for funding, applicants become recipients and agree to the terms outlined in the contract. There are a few responsibilities I want to highlight in the next slide before you begin completing your application. Draft templates of the grant contract agreement and the deferred loan contract can be found on our website for your review. And I definitely encourage you to take a look at these so you can kind of better understand how this works on the back end. And we encourage applicants to review them, of course, and become familiar with expectations, like I just said. The contractual relationship is between Minnesota Housing and the city. Minnesota Housing will not be working with the developer directly at all. That is the responsibility of the city or the recipients. Applicants are expected to make sure their contract with the developer ensures compliance with their contract with Minnesota Housing. Construction timeline. As mentioned earlier, construction must start within 12 months of signing the contract and must be completed within the 3-year term. Most of the projects that we see come through don't have any problem having that work out. Recipients will need to make sure the developer produces the amount of units outlined in the application within the construction timeline outlined in the contract. So just make sure that whatever you commit to is what the end result is as far as units are concerned. This information can be found in Section 3 of the grant contract agreement and deferred loan contract both. Disbursement requests. Recipients will submit disbursement requests and supporting due diligence items to receive funds. We will talk more about the disbursement process shortly. This information can also be found in Section 4.2 of the grant contract agreement and Section 4.3 of the deferred loan contract. Recipients will be responsible for collecting information from the developer to satisfy annual reporting requirements. At a minimum, recipients will be monitored at project closeout. Recipients are expected to retain records for their award, and they need to maintain this for the length of the records retention period outlined in the contract. And this information is explained further in Exhibit A of both contracts. Recipients are responsible for making sure the developer and all parties involved comply with all local, state, and federal laws. This includes visibility requirements under Minnesota Statute 462A 6.34. This information can also be found in Exhibit A of the contract. And I think that statute and all the statutes that are referenced in this program are linked throughout the application document for your convenience. Contracting and bidding. Recipients must competitively bid the project in accordance to the contract. And prevailing wage under Minnesota Statute 116J.871 applies to this program. And you should expect to sign a certification for that when the contracts get mailed out. The contracting, bidding, and prevailing wage requirements can be found in Section 4.4 of the Grant Contract Agreement and Section 4.5 of the Deferred Loan Contract. Applicants should consult with their legal staff with questions and to help them determine how to comply with all of these laws. Minnesota Housing staff is not going to be providing legal advice or guidance. If you have additional questions on prevailing wage, I would encourage you to reach out to the Minnesota Department of Labor for additional questions. And I can provide, if you have further questions or need a contact there, feel free to shoot me an email. My contact information will be listed at the end of this presentation, and I can set you up with a contact to get additional information if needed. Next, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the disbursement process. Funds will be dispersed in 3 increments: an initial disbursement, a second disbursement mid-construction, and then a final disbursement once construction is completed. Applicants will be able to receive up to 1/3 of their award at each disbursement. And that can pretty much take place as soon as you sign the contract. Applicants will complete a disbursement request form for every one of the requests, and recipients must satisfy all due diligence requirements prior to receiving a disbursement of funds. Prior to receiving the initial disbursements, applicants will need to submit a commitment letter from the first mortgage lender that also includes a loan closing date. And then we have, a few additional requirements to receive the final construction disbursement. I won't get into the detail of that, but just be prepared to, be able to provide documentation that you've finished and closed out construction. What is the application timeline? Applications are due by 12 p.m. noon Central Standard Time on Thursday, December 17th, 2020. Applicants will submit their completed applications via a secure upload tool. The link to the upload tool is in the application and can also be found on our website. And it's very, very simple to use. If you have any questions about that, feel free to either call or email me, and I'll be happy to walk you through that. But again, it's very simple. Applications will be reviewed, scored, and presented to a selection committee in February, and then will be taken to the March board meeting for Minnesota Housing. Awards will be announced within a week of the board meeting. And typically the board meetings for Minnesota Housing, you can look on our website, but are the third Thursday of every month. So typically the materials for the board meeting will be available within that week prior to the board meeting. So just kind of a side note to take a look on our website and check that out if you do end up submitting an application, and you can maybe see a few more details there a little sooner. Now I'd like to go ahead and share some additional website information and other resources. After the demonstration, I will open up the presentation for questions that anyone has. For information about the question and answer portion of the webinar, view the program FAQs that have been updated to include new information. This is maybe one of the most helpful documents that we provide, I think, in any RFP, so make sure to check that out. If you do have questions, there's a lot that's probably answered there that might come up. A few highlights this year, there is a new workbook. Please make sure to download and use this new version, as prior versions will not be accepted. So if you did submit an application last year, or you prepared materials and didn't submit that application, you do need to re-enter all that information into the new workbook. Last year's is outdated. We will be underwriting and sizing the need for public subsidy. So please make sure to explain any deviations from the assumptions that are made in the workbook. And then the other thing I want to highlight is that's a bit of a change this year. A portion of a project's units may have rental restrictions this year, but this requires Minnesota Housing's prior written consent. And you can refer to page 14 of the program guide for additional details on that. Minnesota Housing does offer other funding resources outside of the workforce housing program for affordable housing development. Our low and moderate income rental loan, or LMIR loan as we refer to it, is an amortizing first mortgage. It typically has the lowest interest rate in the market for this type of financing, and it can be a 40-year fixed mortgage if you would like. Tax credits and deferred loans are also available through the consolidated RFP. And Karen Polito can be contacted for further information regarding the affordable housing resources. And her information is on that slide, or email address. Minnesota Housing also offers a deferred loan for landlords in Greater Minnesota to rehabilitate existing rental housing. And there's quite a bit more information on the slide that I won't get into on this program, but we'll make this all available afterwards. You can contact Irene for more information on this program. And that pretty much wraps up my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in and I can look at them now. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out to me. It's Sarah Bunn at 651-296-9827 or 612-501-3012. And then you can also send an email to either my personal email account at Minnesota Housing or the general workforce housing account that we have listed on the slide as well. So I'm not seeing any questions right now, but if anyone has any, feel free to type them in, or like I said, you can also email them over to me or give me a call. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we're hoping to see many applications this year. And again, just, I don't know, Patty, can we, it looks like maybe someone has a question.
Yes, Kathy, are you online? I see you have your hand raised, but it doesn't look like I can unmute you. Oh, looks like your hand went down. Kathy, if you have a question, feel free to throw it in that questions box, or you can always email the workforce housing team at this email below that she's got listed on the screen.
Okay. All right. Well, feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, my name is Sarah Bunn. I'm happy to answer any questions or sit down and go over things with you. Feel free to email me examples of documents if you would like to look at. I'm more than happy to review things. And otherwise, thanks for joining us and have a wonderful afternoon.